Hey Blender Kids, this here is a recap video of session number 5 from the Blender Kids workshop. Alright, let's jump right in. Because today we're going to use this spaceship and create a fun little animation loop. So let's take a look at the loop we're going to create. This here is the animation we are going to create. Our spaceship enters our scene and does a flip and then exits. And then we start all over again. So this is an endless loop. As you can see, it exits and comes back in and keeps looping forever. Super cool, isn't it? So let's get right to it and begin to learn the skills needed to put this kind of an animation together. So here we are in the Blender default scene, and as always, I'm going to quickly select our light and our camera, and I'm going to delete them because we don't need it, and I'm going to jump into the front view. And now we're going to learn how to animate this cube. So what is animation? Well, animation is just an object moving from point A to point B across time. So say if this cube takes about 1 second to move from here to here, there you go, you have animation. So how do we create this animation in Blender? For starters, we need the timeline panel. So down here in the layout view, if you come down here and click here and drag this up, here we have the timeline panel. So let's take a quick look at the timeline panel. So here in the timeline panel, we have a blue scroll bar, and you can see if I click on this and I drag, I can scroll across my timeline. Up here, there are a couple of buttons, and here you can play the animation. So I'm clicked and play, and now you have a pause button, so I can pause. And here we can just jump back to our start frame by clicking on this. There you go, we'll jump back to the start frame. There are a couple of other buttons which we'll get to in later sessions. Now here we have the number 1. If I click on this tiny arrow, you can see it's changed to 2, but you also can see that the scroll bar has moved. So this way I can increment and move my scroll bar by 1 frame, or I can go ahead and enter a number, say 50, and my scroll bar will jump to 50. If I enter 180, it will jump to 180. Now next to that we have start. So this is the start frame of our active timeline, and this is the end frame, 250. Now I can change this value to say 150, and you can see now the timeline has kind of changed. That said, the scroll bar can move beyond your timeline. However, this still remains the active timeline. So if you were to animate or if you were to export your animation, only 150 frames will be exported. We'll get to all of that in a bit. Alright, so now this is the way you can change your active timeline. Now before we move ahead, what are these numbers after all? Well, these numbers indicate each frame in our timeline. So our timeline is a stack of frames put together that play in sequence when we hit the play button like this. So spacebar is also a play button. So you can see now all the frames are being played one after the other. And the rate at which these frames are played is called the frame rate. And typically frame rates are measured as frames per second. So the number of frames that exist in 1 second. Now, if we come in here to our properties panel and click on output, you can see here we have an option called frame rate. And currently our timeline is set to 24 frames per second FPS. And here in the drop down, you have a whole bunch of other options. Now I like to set this at 30 frames per second because this creates more smooth animation and also divides your timeline in a better way. Now that I know that 30 frames per second, that means at 30 frames, this is 1 second. At 60 frames, this is 2 seconds. At 90 frames, this is 3 seconds. At 120 frames, this is 4 seconds, and so on and so forth. Now let's look at how do we animate our object from point A to point B. To do that, we need to add something called a keyframe. So what is a keyframe? A keyframe is nothing but a bookmark that records all the values of your object at that point in time. Now let's look at what are the values of properties this cube has. So I'm going to click on the cube and I'm going to hit N on the keyboard, which brings up my item menu, and here we have our transformation values. So these are the values of our object. Of course, these are not the only animatable properties. You can animate a whole lot of other properties for a particular object, but right now we're going to only look at the transformation properties, right? So here we have these properties, and you can see right now our scroll bar is at 1 and our cube is at this position with these property values. So all I have to do now is add a keyframe. And the way to add a keyframe or to record your properties at that point in time is to hover your mouse over this and hit I on your keyboard. As soon as you do that, you have inserted a keyframe And you can see these values have changed their color, and down here in your timeline, if I move my scroll bar, you can see a tiny little diamond has appeared. This diamond represents a keyframe, and that means that this keyframe has these values. So here with my scroll bar on the keyframe, you can see that your keyframe properties are yellow, but if I were to move my scroll bar, it no longer is yellow. This tells me that there is a keyframe on these properties, but it's just not at the current position. As soon as it turns yellow, I know that at this current position, there is a keyframe. All right. Now, here you can see a tiny little arrow. If you click on that, that brings up summary. So the summary is a twirl down menu. If you click on that, you can see you have your cube. And as soon as you add a keyframe, it adds a cube action. And under the cube action, if you click on that, you can see you have object transforms. And object transforms means all these values. Let's go ahead and twirl that down. And there you go. You can see we have X location, Y location, and Z location, and you can see there's a keyframe on all of them. That means these values have been recorded for the cube at frame number 1. So this is position A. Let's go ahead to save frame number 30. So I'm going to click on this and click on and type in 30. So I'm jumping 1 second ahead in my timeline because I know my frame rate is 30 frames per second. Alright, and so now here I'm going to change these values. So I'm going to go ahead and move this on the x-axis and say I'm going to enter a value of 10. And there you go, you can see my cube has moved here. And now you can see in addition to these green tabs, you can see the X is now orange. The orange color tells me that I've changed the value, but I haven't added a keyframe. Now this is important because if I were to move my scroll bar, you'll see that this object jumps back because I haven't recorded this value. Take a look. There you go. As soon as I moved my scroll bar, this has turned green again because it defaults to the last recorded value, which is this. So let's jump ahead again to 30. And let's go ahead and change this to 10. And now before I move my scroll bar, I'm going to insert a keyframe by hitting I on the keyboard. And as soon as I do that, you can see we have keyframes here in the timeline. Alright, now if you look closely in the timeline, you can see that the X location has 2 keyframes, but the Y and the Z locations, alright, they have this kind of a connection. It's connected. This tells you that there is no change in the value. Let's look at it closely. If you look at the first frame and let's look at the Y and Z value, here Y and Z, they are 0. And if I jump to 30 and I look at the Y and Z value, it's still 0. That means it hasn't changed. And that's why we have this kind of a bar connecting the 2 keyframes. This indicates that there is no change in value. However, if you look at the X value, here the X value is 0, but at 30, the X value is 10, and that's why there is no bar connecting the 2 keyframes because there is a change in value. Now if I jump back to my start frame and hit space bar, you can see now we have animation. Our object has moved from point A to point B because we have recorded 2 different positions, and now Blender knows that it has to go from position 1 to position 2 when we play the timeline. Perfect. Alright, so here we have one motion. Alright, so let's go ahead and add another keyframe. And what I want to do is I want this cube to go back to its original position. So I'm just going to jump 1 second ahead, so 60 frames, and I'm going to zero out this value. Again, it's turned orange. All I have to do is click I on the keyboard, and there you go, we've added another set of keyframes at 60. And now if I were to play this animation, we have the cube go to point A, and it's come back. Perfect. So here we have this kind of a yo-yo motion. Now you might notice that it plays the animation once and then nothing happens because the timeline is playing, and then it reaches 150 and starts again. So what Blender is doing, it's looping the active area. Now what I want to do is I wanted to loop it right after 60. I don't want it to play ahead till 150 because we have nothing here till 150. So all I have to do is change the end. So I'm going to click on that, hit 60, and now our active timeline is 1 to 60. And if I were to play now by hitting the play button or spacebar, you can see my object is moving from point A to B and back, and it's doing this indefinitely. And we have essentially created a looping animation. Now what we've done is we've just animated along one property. In Blender or any other animation application, you can animate several properties at the same time. So let's take a look at that. Right now, I'm going to go to frame number 1 and I want to add a rotation to my cube as it travels from point A to point B. So I want it to roll as it goes to point B and then roll back as it comes to point A again. So the way I'm going to do that is I need to keyframe my rotation values. So here you can see that we don't have a keyframe on the rotation values. So we need to come back to our first frame and come here and hit I. So we have inserted keyframes. And now let's jump to 30. So I'm going to enter the value 30. And now I want this, at this point, I want the cube to have completed one revolution. For those of you who already know, one revolution is 360 degrees. So, and I want it to happen across the y-axis. So I'm going to click on this and hit 360 on my numpad and enter. And there you go. You can see it's orange in color. It's time to hit I and insert that keyframe. Perfect. Now, if I were to scrub my scroll bar, you can see my object is moving and rotating as it's moving. So we've actually stacked the animation. We have motion from point A to point B and revolution or rotation while the motion is happening. All right. And now you can see it rolls and then comes back, rolls and then comes back, rolls and then comes back. It's super satisfying, isn't it? All right. Now let's make it roll back. Okay. So let's jump to 60 and go back to 0. It's that simple, and hit I on the keyboard to insert that keyframe. And now we have this never-ending, endless loop of our cube going from point A to point B and rotating as it's going. So that was a quick demonstration of animation in Blender and how to add keyframes and how to stack animation, that you can animate various properties at the same time. Now we're going to use these same principles to animate our spaceship. So let's jump right in. Alright, so here we have our spaceship model all colored and ready to be animated. But before we can animate our spaceship, we need to set it up. Right now you can see our spaceship is made up of several objects, and animating all of these objects individually isn't a good idea. So what we want to do is we want to connect all of them together. But I don't want to join all of this and make it one mesh. So the way to connect all of this is to use a technique called parenting. So what is parenting? Let's take a look. So I want to parent this cube. The smaller cube is the child. I want to parent this cube to the bigger cube. And the way we do that is we click on the child first, and then we hold down Shift on the keyboard and click on the parent. All right. As soon as we've done that, when we click the parent last, the parent is the active element or active object. And now all we have to do is hold Control and P. As soon as we do that, you can see this menu, Set Parent To. All we have to click here is Object. Now, as soon as we did that, you notice some change here in the outliner. If I click on this drop down, you can see that the cube 8 has cube 004 under it, inside it. If I were to twirl this, you wouldn't see cube 4. It's actually inside. That tells me that this cube is now parented with this cube. And what that means is that this cube is stuck with this parent. Wherever the parent goes, the cube goes. So here I'm selecting the cube, only the cube, and I'm moving it around. Let's rotate it. And you get the picture, right? Now this cube here is bound by the parent in this parent-child relationship. But the interesting thing is that if I select the child, I can rotate the child or move the child independently without impacting the parent. But whatever position I keep the child at, and then if I come back to the parent and move it, you can see that the child maintains its position, but it also moves with the parent. And this is a really powerful function. It's not only present in Blender, it's also there in other 3D applications. And we're going to use this extensively as we move forward in our Blender learning. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this for now. Now let's apply this parenting function to our spaceship. Now you'd think that we'd select all our objects and parent it to one part of the spaceship, but that too isn't a very good idea. The way we typically do this is we add something called an empty. So what is an empty? So I'm just going to go ahead and select all of these by shift selecting all of them. And I'm clicking on this eye to turn their visibility off. And there you go. So now you can see everything is hidden. Okay. Now I'm going to hit Shift A. And in this menu down here, you can see empty. And in the drop down, all you have to click on is the plane axis. As soon as I click on that, you can see an axis appears. The empty is just that. It's empty. It only has transformation values. So this will never show up in your render. But it has transformation values like X, Y, Z. So if I move this and this up and down, it has transformation values. It has rotation and scale as well. All right. Now, why this is useful is that I can now come in and parent all these objects to the empty, and then I can use the empty to animate my spaceship, which makes it a singular object. So let's take a look at how to do that. It's super simple. Now that we know these are the objects we want to parent with the empty, all we have to do is click on the first object and shift select all the objects. So now we have selected all the children and we've left out the empty because the empty is the parent. And the way to select the parent, once you have shift selected all the children, is to now let go of shift and hold down control and click the empty. There you go. Now you have everything selected and you can see that the empty, this orange or yellow line, looks a little different from the rest of them because this is now the active element. And now all I have to do is hit Ctrl P and click on object, and perfect. Now you can see in your outliner, all your cubes have disappeared. Well, they haven't disappeared. They've just gotten stacked inside the empty. And this tells me that all of them are now parented to the empty. So guess what? If I were to select the empty and move it around, my whole spaceship moves. If I were to rotate, the whole spaceship rotates. And that's perfect. All right. So now we've essentially created a handle for our spaceship. All right. So once we have our spaceship set up, it's time to add a camera. So I'm going to hit Shift A and add a camera. Now what follows is pretty normal. So I'm going to jump into the camera mode and lock the view and pull out. And there you go. And now I have a view of my spaceship. But now you might notice that in my viewport, I can see this line. Now I know that when this line appears, this means that this is my field of view in the camera. And when I see this, I know that I'm looking through the camera and not just in the viewport. However, since this is the border, I want to see the rest of the border as well because I need to know what my field of view is. And unfortunately now, even though I zoom in and zoom out, this doesn't change. Now the reason for that is it's because my view is locked. So if I unlock this and if I zoom out, now you can see the field of view is more visible. You can see the whole frame. But since this is unlocked now, if you were to orbit, you would jump out of the camera and now you're no longer in the camera view. So let me jump back into the camera. And if I were to zoom in, this was what I was dealing with before. And notice I've locked this right now. Now if I were to move around, I still can't see my frame. The way to correct that is to unlock and only zoom out. Do not orbit. All right, so just zoom out, bring it to a position that you like, and then click on the lock button. And now if you were to orbit, you can see our frame remains there, even though I zoom in or zoom out. So this is something that's useful so that you can know what your frame is, because this is a really important part of working with 3D. You always need to know what your camera is looking at. All right. So now I'm going to set a camera view something like this. Perfect. Now that we have a camera set up in our file, it's time to set up our Blender user interface in a way that helps us do the animation. What I mean by that is that at any given point while animating, you want to be able to see what your camera sees. But if you were to be working in this viewport and adding lights and moving around, your camera view will keep moving, and that's not ideal. So what I typically do is I set my camera the way I like it. And so, I fix the magnification, the angle, and then I bring my mouse up here, make it a plus sign, and click and create a new panel. And so I have two viewports now. And so this side I keep it for my camera, I don't move around here, and this side I'll jump out of the camera, and here is where I'll work and create all the other assets, right? And I'll always leave this panel on so that I can see it in real time what's happening. So, and I typically keep this in the rendered view. So now you can see we have no light, and I also turn off the grid by clicking on this show overlays button. So here we can see how our final image will look. Right now it looks pretty dark. That's because we have no lights, and that's what we're going to do next. So let's go ahead and add a sunlight. There you go, and here we have a sun. Now as soon as I put a sun, you can see in our final rendered view, this is how it's going to look. So I want to change the angle a bit. So I'm going to rotate the sun and try to get an angle that I like. Now you can see the shadows are being cast this way. That means the light is falling from here. I don't typically like that. I want to light my spaceship from this side. I want the sunlight to fall from this side. So let's tweak around with the sun's position and begin to see where we get. There you go. So now you can see the shadows are falling this direction. So I think this is kind of in the right position. All right. So I think I like this kind of an angle. Okay. Now the next thing I'd do is I'd change the intensity of the sunlight. So with my sunlight selected, I go to the properties panel and click on the data, which has a light bulb as an icon, and here let's increase the strength to 5, and you can see now we've increased the brightness. Okay, and now also you can see the shadows are really stark, so I always like to increase the angle of our light, and this kind of softens the shadows. Don't tweak it too much, bring it a little down so that we have some shadows. Okay, I'm still gonna tweak the light a bit. Yeah, there you go. I want something like this so that there's more shadow on this side. Right now what I'm doing is I'm just positioning the light in a way that looks nice to me. Okay, so now that we have our spaceship set up for animation, we have a camera and we have a light in our scene, it's time to do our animation. So here we are in our frame, and what we want to do is we want the spaceship to enter our frame, stay here for a bit, and then exit our frame. So the first thing we want to do is we want to define the total length of our animation, and that is our start and end. I'd like it to end at 150, right? And so here our animation loop is from 1 to 150. Okay, now at the first frame, let's go ahead and add our first keyframe. So at this point we want our spaceship to be outside. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the value of Y, and as I do that, oops, I have my sun selected. So just click on the empty, and we can double click on it and actually rename this to spaceship. Now with the spaceship selected, let's go ahead and change the Y value. And there you go, you can see your spaceship is moving. Let's push the value further so that it exits the frame completely. There you go, here we are. And now let's just click on I on your keyboard and keyframe. So right now we've recorded this value for the spaceship at frame number 1. Now I want the spaceship to enter frame in 30 frames. So let's jump to 30. All right. I noticed that my frame rate is not 30, so I'm just going to change that to 30. All right. So here we are at 30, and now I'm going to change this value and bring it right in the middle of my frame, somewhere here. Perfect. And there you go. You can see that this has changed color. It's time to hit I, and now I've added a keyframe. Now if I jump to our first frame and play, there you go. Just like the cube, but in this case we have our spaceship enter the frame. Now the spaceship has entered the frame, and we want it to sit here for a while, and then we want to exit. And so I want to make it sit here for a while, and at 120 I'm going to add another keyframe. Now notice what happened here. You can see these bars that are connecting the two keyframes. Like I told you, this tells me that there is no change in the value, and that means our spaceship is just sitting there. And this is also referred to as a hold in animation. Right now, our spaceship is holding its position. Okay. Now, beyond 120, we want the spaceship to exit the frame by 150. So I'm going to come in here and change this value to 150 so I'm accurate. And now let's just move the Y value further and have it exit the space and have it exit the frame. There you go. And now I'm just going to hit I on the keyboard and you can see I've added keyframes. And since the values are different, there is no line connecting them. All right, so now let's jump back here. And here we have our animation. The spaceship enters the frame and then the spaceship exits the frame. And that's it for this recap. This is how you animate in your spaceship. In the next session, we'll look at adding some more interesting motion to the spaceship, and we'll also look into adding that terrain that speeds by underneath the spaceship. I'll see you in the next session.